Welcome to the Bucher and Friends podcast. Here is your host.
Let's send it over to Rick Bucher.
Rick Bucher.
All right, welcome to another episode of Bucher and Friends, part of the United WeCast Network.
One of the best friends.
Yes, the one and only Steven Jackson. We happen to be both at FS1 doing a little bit of work, and Stack started talking about his travel plans and his methods. And I said, you know what? We got to get this. We got to let the world know what it's like if you are traveling in the company of one Steven Jackson.
Yeah, well, you know, John Sally is one of those guys. You know, he's well respected. He made a comment recently in the interview. He was like, my whole career, I think I bumped into one guy, and Steven Jackson has the best pot in the NBA and NBA history. I've always blessed him with the best stuff. And one thing about me, when I travel, I can't really sleep on planes, so I always bring edibles. You know, the Fruity Pebble treats. I'm really into the cereal treats, and I have a company that I buy them from called Butter Baby here in LA, and they make the best. And you can tell them how high you want the dosage in them. So I get mine real low because I like the way they taste. So I get on planes all the time with them. You know, get on planes just so I can have a comfortable flight. And I've had a couple flights where I've shared with everybody in first class. And those normally are the best flights. Those normally are the best flights. Everybody, I remember one time I was eating one, and the lady next to me was like, "What is that?" I'm like, "It's it's a cereal bar." I didn't tell her what it was at first.
Seriously?
Yeah, no. I told her it was a cereal bar. She's like, "Oh, it looks good." I mean, got THC in it. You know, I leaned over and told her. Right. She laughed, and she told her husband. Well, her husband was like, "Really?"
So, how old were these people?
Like in their mid-40s.
And where were you headed?
I was headed to L.A.
Okay.
I was coming from Atlanta to L.A.
Right. So were these hip people, or were they kind of like...
They wasn't too hip.
Yeah.
But the husband knew who I was.
Okay.
The wife wasn't too hip. The husband knew who I was. And actually, if you looked at the first class, you would not think that the flight was finna turn how it turned. It was a couple. Right. It was a couple of elder people in the first class. A
little straight.
Yeah, you wouldn't expect this to turn this way.
Okay.
So we had a conversation. She told her husband, and he actually was the first one to ask for a piece. I was surprised.
Okay.
So I gave him a piece, and it was half the bar, and he was eating it, and he gave his wife a piece. They was enjoying it, and the guy behind me, what did you just give him? I gave him an edible. Just so happened I got a bag full of them. Just so happened I got a bag full of Fruity Pebble treats. 10 minutes later, it's 8 to 10 seats in first class. About 7 to 8 seats are the edibles. So we're all in there laughing at the person in the front TV. The stewardess come through and crack a joke. The whole first class laughing. And it was funny because I remember this one older lady. She wanted to join in on the reindeer games. And I knew I'm pretty sure she's never eaten the edible before. Right. I'm pretty sure she's probably never got high before. Right. But so she was like, well, what is that? And she was sitting close to me, and I broke it down to her. She's like, hell, everybody else doing it. And I give her a piece. And she really enjoyed it. I think she really enjoyed the taste and all that. But I was kind of worried about her. Because the flight from Atlanta to LA is 4.5, 5 hours, right? And no one can sleep for 5 hours on a plane. I think she enjoyed that edibles a little bit too much because I had took my bags off the overhead, right? Packed my chargers. On the way off the plane, I looked to the right. She's in a coma. She's over there sleep. I'm talking about just so peaceful, and she's sleeping so good. I'm like, I hope she all right, because she might be enjoying it a little bit too much. Ask Rick Mahorn. I even took Rick Mahorn on a first class edible trip, and he loved it with the big three. But you know, it's funny because you don't expect that, but it's an icebreaker.
Yeah.
I'm sitting in first class with a whole bunch of people I don't know. Sure. Next thing you know, we're talking and joking and laughing, you know, and I'm happy to do that because I'm one guy, Rick, and you know me. I love everybody. Mm-hmm. I'm far from racist. Mm-hmm. I love everybody. If you follow my Instagram, I'm spreading love. I'm spreading unity. Mm-hmm. You know, so when I do stuff like that, people might look at it as because it's involving THC, but I look at it different. I'm bringing people together. Yeah. This will never happen in first class again. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so those are moments I hold on to because I'm actually doing something positive. Yeah. You know, I'm getting people high, but at the same time, I'm making people talk to people that they wouldn't really talk to, interact with people they wouldn't really interact with.
I just had this conversation with Andre Drummond on a podcast, and we talked about being a big physical black man, and for him being really personable, but people just by appearance, like,
They're gonna hold back.
right? You seem to get around that pretty quickly. How do you do it? How did you learn to do it? How did you get comfortable doing it?
By being proactive and not reactive. I act. I don't wait to see how somebody's going to act me and see if they want to engage in contact. I offer first. I might see a guy walking and he might not feel comfortable or feel
And you can tell.
I can tell. And he might not feel comfortable to come and speak to me. I'll go over and say, "What's up, man? You want a picture?" And just break the ice. And that's the best way to do it. Don't be proactive. Don't be reactive.
Yeah. I would imagine that you sense it, you say something, and you can see the flip.
Oh, definitely,
Right?
definitely. Because
That must be a kick.
if I if I open up and open up to them,
Yeah.
it's easy for them to let go and to open up a conversation. Now, you might have a new friend. I got to tell you this story. I was on a plane with an older vet. He was an older guy. And
Military vet.
Older military vet. And I sat on the plane with him. And coming to my seat, I really didn't. When you late, you really don't want to ask people to move so you can get in your seat. You want to try to be polite as possible. So, and I knew he was an older guy, so I'm being real respectful, right? I'm being super respectful. And I asked him, "This is my seat, sir." Da, da. He stood up and he did this. Give me a hand. "What's up, man?" Gave me the whole brother handshake.
Really?
I'm like, it blew my mind. I'm like, oh, and I gave him a hug. I'm like, "How you doing?" Yo, we sat there. He talked about Muhammad Ali. He told me about he told me about war stories, how they had to play dead.
Wow.
And how stories about how he could never be racist because of his relationships with black men in the war. Like, it was so much stuff that I learned from him from being in the war, and how at a time when racism was at its height,
Sure.
that it was still people spreading love and still coming together. And he was telling me all the stories, and all his best friends were black.
Now, this is a white dude, a white
older
vet.
white guy.
Yeah.
Older white guy.
Yeah.
And it blew my mind. And I posted a picture of me and him on my Instagram after the flight.
Huh.
Some of his family members got on the post and said, "He's been speaking so highly of you." So I made it. It's crazy.
Wow.
That I think that was only God's wisdom. But this guy was there for me to talk to and gain a lot of wisdom from, because a lot of times when you see a younger black guy and an older white guy, last thing you think that they're going to do is have a conversation to be laughing together.
Sure.
You automatically think that gap is so far ahead that
Sure.
they cannot have a healthy conversation.
Sure.
And at times I think that.
Yeah.
But this guy really changed my mind. And I say it to say, you never know who you can learn from. You don't judge a book by its cover, because that guy really changed my life in a big way.
I would think on some level, and I certainly didn't expect us to go from having a party and edibles on a plane to getting this kind of heavy. But I wonder, because there are so many people in the black community that I know that feel as if they've been mistreated, and that the white community still, there's not a balance there. So when someone such as yourself or someone from the black community reaches out and doesn't see that color or tries to bridge that gap, it's almost looked at as if you're being a traitor.
Uncle Tom.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I always wonder, like, how do you get around that? Because the respective races staying on their side of the street and holding that line, like, that's not going to solve anything. That's not going to resolve the problem. And yet, when the community with you sees you as a traitor, if you do that, like, how do you bridge that gap? How do you find a solution?
Well, it's kind of damn if you do and damn if you don't. But at the end of the day, all you can do is worry about what you can control.
Yeah.
And me personally, experience is the best teacher. I had a lot of people come in my life. I had a lot of people help me, but nobody helped me more, or I can't say more, but somebody who's helped me the most in my life is a white guy, Josh Pastner. Growing up in Port Arthur, Texas, we didn't have AAU. Houston's an hour and a half away. I couldn't get to Houston. This guy showed up at a park in my ghetto by himself at 16 years old from Houston, pulled up, and everybody looking at him like, oh, we finna rob him. We finna take this truck. Everybody looking at him like that. He had the balls to walk up to this park, Steven Jackson, how you doing? I'm like, everybody looking like he the police. He the cop. He the cops.
Yeah.
I talked to him like, my name is Josh Pastner. I do such and such AAU team in Houston. I want you to come play on my team.
How did he hear about you?
I was one of the top players in high school in Texas.
Okay.
And he lived in Kingwood. So he came down. He was like, I want you to come play on our team. I'm like, I can't get to Houston for practice every day. He drove after school. He was still in high school. We same age. After he got out of high school, he drove an hour to Port Arthur, Texas. Hour and 15 minutes to Port Arthur. Picked me up, drove me back to Houston to practice, drove me back home, then drove back so he can work out and go to school in the morning.
Wow.
So I'm saying that to say, I've made money, or I've been blessed to have a relationship, and I'm been blessed to say I love somebody in every race. So I lead by example by telling people these type of stories. It's impossible for me to be racist, and you shouldn't either, because anywhere in life, anywhere and be successful, you have to have a relationship with every race. You have to come across every race, and I preach that, and I like to use those examples because where I'm from, I really don't have to stand up and say, oh, I'm real. My resume is 100.
Speaks for itself.
It speaks for itself. Everybody know where I'm from.
Yeah.
And I live off that. And I'm one of those people, Rick, and I'll say this. A lot of people are scared to go home because they're scared of what happened. Well, I love the ghetto more than I'm scared to go home. And if a similar situation happened to me that happened to Nipsey, I wouldn't be mad at it.
Why?
Because this is the life I chose.
Yeah.
I chose to lead by example.
Yeah.
I'm not one of those guys to say do this and not do it. I choose to lead by example.
See, this is, and I think that, most people in other communities understand the false narrative of this, but what happened in Nipsey, people in the white community will say
it's gang violence.
And why, like, this isn't a white-black problem. This is a black-on-black problem. So don't talk about racism, or don't talk that the white man's holding the black man down. The black man's doing it to himself.
Right.
And that's, to me, is like the most tragic, is that this offers more ammo for that line of thinking.
What it does.
Right?
Right.
But it's also kind of false, because it doesn't, you can use that as an example, but but still the scales are tilted in a way that's unfair, right?
And it's a better way to put it. You can't say it's black on black. It's more of people who have hate and have jealousy, they always win. Like, it's so many people that's jealous. There's so many people that hate to see the next person. That's the crab in the bucket mentality that's in the black community. We're all struggling. The best way to kill gun violence, the best way to stop all that, is to help stop poverty. How do you do that? If so many people have the attitude of, well, I have to have a chip on my shoulder to make it. I have to be this strong guy to come from these circumstances, because look at it. It's 20 people here I grew up with, and only 2 of us made it.
Yeah.
So the attitude of, I have to belittle somebody or step on somebody's toes to gain that, the crab in the bucket mentality, that is the biggest problem in our neighborhoods. Yeah. It's not just black on black. You have other races that are jealous of the other. But in the black community, it's a big problem, because you never want to see the next guy make it. And you can have the same opportunities, but God has blessed me a little bit more than the next guy, and he feel like, well, damn, why I didn't get those opportunities? You know what? I never liked him anyway. Let me go ruin everything. I ain't got nothing going on anyway.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
And that, to me, is the biggest thing, is that
nothing to lose.
Exactly. And that's when people are desperate and they got nothing to lose, that's when crazy stuff steps off.
Guaranteed to happen.
And if you give people something that is worth protecting, then they're going to think twice about endangering that.
Right. And if you value your life, you will put a lot of things in perspective when it's time to take someone else's life.
For sure.
If you value yours.
Yeah.
And that's another thing, a big problem in the black community. We don't value our lives. We don't know that we're just more important than anybody. And a lot of people are not taught that. A lot of people still have that slave mentality, Rick. A lot of them are still stuck, the white man holding me down, or that type of mentality, and that's a big problem. That's a big problem. Nobody's holding you back. What you were taught is holding you back. Your attitude is holding you back. It's not the area. They can't say the hood is the reason why I don't make it.
Yeah.
I'm from the hood. It's too many of us from the hood that's successful now.
Yeah.
You can't use that excuse no more.
Yeah.
You can't use the white man. You can't say that, because the main reason a lot of people are successful is because of the white man. Let's be real. So I say this, like the people that can seriously say that they haven't came across every race or made money with every race, I'm proud to say that I can say that I love someone in every race, because I genuinely do, because I know I've came across somebody who's done something in my life that either changed it, I learned something from them, or they helped me.
Yeah.
Every race. And if people, and a lot of people have been in that situation, they just have too much pride to admit it. A lot of black people are afraid to admit a white person helped them. Why? Help is help. Help don't have color.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest problem, too much pride.
The thing that probably, and it sticks in my mind, is there's a couple times I'd go play pickup, predominantly black players, right? And guys would come at me, and guys would get ticked because I was white, and because I was there, and it was almost like you're intruding on my territory. And I would think, dude, I'm just here to play ball.
That's it.
And I'm not trying to take anything from you.
Right.
And I got the guts to come out here and not see color and play.
You got to respect that.
And want to be equal, right? And you're taking this attitude that only is
everything
more
you trying to build, he's taking away from
Yes, that's more divisive. Like, and I'm not the enemy, because I got the willingness to come here. Right. That's the part that would always kill me. And I would imagine it's the same for you, like in going back to the neighborhood, or having this idea that it's got to be, no, you can't have relationships with white people in the business, because you're betraying us, because they're the enemy.
I hear so much, especially working with Jason Whitlock. I hear so much of how could you work with this guy? He's a hater. He's this and he's that. And I'm quick to say on social media, you can have your own opinion about him. You're entitled to that. But me, I've learned a lot from this guy. And I might not agree with everything he says, but what you're saying about him is totally wrong.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they're on the outside looking in. And that's what it is a lot. People on the outside looking in. A lot of people, you have to come from these areas to understand certain situations, but you got to understand too, you can have all the information of the area. You can be familiar with the area to a T. It's one person in that area that would not like you just because you're successful, or just because you have more than them. And that's going to always be the problem. Yeah. And that problem is kind of, to me, it's just as big as racism. Jealousy. Instead of getting on your grind and asking for help and not having pride to make it, you rather just sit there and take from somebody else. That's the biggest problem in our neighborhood, is jealousy.
What have you, we have to wrap this up because we both have TV duties coming up. When you look at what you learned through playing basketball in the NBA and what you've learned being in the media now for a number of years, where do you think you've learned the most? What has changed your view or your understanding of how the world works more?
Being here now, being in this business now, I've learned how to respect people's opinions. I think being a basketball player, nobody's opinion matters. You playing basketball, you do it your way, you march to the beat of your own drum. I think in this business, you have to respect other people's opinions in order to be respected. Yeah. Because we all have our own opinions, and we all trying to get our points across. Sure. So being able to respect other people and respect other people's opinions, and also listen more than talking, I've learned that from Whitlock for sure.
So with that, because we gotta add like some sort of basketball element to this conversation.
Okay, it's something, right?
And I know you've talked about this, and I know I've talked about this, but people, and Colin Cowherd is one of them, bag on Kevin Durant with the idea that he would leave Golden State to go to New York.
I hate the idea. I want him to stay there. I want him to get all the money he can. Just think. He'll go 4 years, four finals championships, 4 finals MVPs. That would be awesome for him.
It would be.
With a big contract.
But I also look at it as, if KD wants to do something different, if he wants to experience something different, if he's looking bigger picture, and this is just my idea. Mm-hmm. LeBron has made the move to LA. He wants to be bigger than just a basketball player.
No question.
Right? I think KD has the same aspirations.
You can only counter that by going to New York.
Exactly. So I can't fault him. On some level, I look at the Knicks history and I think, God, really? You want to do that? I mean, I don't know if you can carry that weight. I don't know if you can get that done, right? But I think that the easier way would be to do what you did, what you're suggesting, which is stay with Golden State. You know what you got. You know what you can do. Like that path's already written.
No question.
Right?
Right.
You go to New York, it's like, whoo.
You bigger than LeBron.
And I don't know if he'll get it done.
Right.
But the fact that he might be willing to try it, I have to respect that.
No, I respect that too, especially if that other piece that everybody's talking about is possibility to go to. I respect that, yeah. But if he could add another piece, he could be setting a legacy for himself.
All right. Always a good time.
Man,
always good to see you, my man.
Glad to be on.
I don't know what we're going to have in our next episode. I don't think we can top this. But this has been Bucher and Friends with Steven Jackson. Wherever you get your podcasts, leave us a rating. It can be good or bad. We don't care. And then if you screenshot that and send it to @BucherFriends, you'll be eligible to win some prizes. In the meantime, as always, my man Jack.
Always. Love
Pleasure.
for life, Rick.
Thank you. All right, before we put a bow on this episode, I do want to get to a subject that a lot of NBA media jumped on with both feet, and that was Paul Pierce comparing himself or being asked who was the better player, Paul Pierce or Dwayne Wade, who has now just played his last game with the Miami Heat and is retiring. Now, this happened on ESPN, and the banner on the screen said, who had the better career? That's not what Paul Pierce was asked. He was asked, who was the better player? And Paul Pierce said, that's easy. Now, I happen to think that, well, number one, what happened when Pierce said that is what drives me crazy about the media today. And yeah, I know I'm talking about my peers and brethren here, but so be it. Because what he said, pound for pound, I agree with him. Just as I tell you that Rasheed Wallace, pound for pound, was a better player than Tim Duncan. Now, he didn't say he had a better career. There's no argument there. In fact, Paul said he would have had a better career if he'd only had the chance to play with the players that Wade had when he had them. And there's great truth in that. You can't put a price on a young Dwayne Wade being groomed in an organization by Pat Riley right from the start. Paul Pierce didn't have that. Came into an organization led by Rick Pitino, both as coach and team president, and he was in over his head. And surrounded by not the best examples when it comes to how to be a pro. Paul had to find his own way. I'll put aside the whole thing where he was unfortunately knifed and nearly lost his life and the recovery from that. But that's a consideration here too. Now, you're not going to hear me spout any numbers here because this isn't about numbers. There's no way to comparatively prove what Paul Pierce said. It's a matter of looking at the two of them as players and what their abilities were and their capabilities and assessing all things being equal. Not looking at their numbers, not looking at their careers, looking at what they were capable of doing as basketball players, as they demonstrated over the course of their careers. And who would I rather have? Quite simply, I feel if I were a GM, if I were a coach, I could do more with Paul Pierce than I could have with Dwayne Wade. Now, none of this is to take anything away from Wade. He had the better career. Clearly, he had the better career because he made the most of his opportunity. And I don't know if Paul could have accomplished as much or more than Wade, as he said. As soon as the guy starts talking about I could have won 5 or 6 championships, he's in over his skis. Because, and Paul should know this, having won one, how difficult, how challenging, how hard it is to win a championship, much less multiple championships. Nonetheless, they're different players. So the teams around them were built differently. But the stability of their respective programs in their prime were starkly different. which is why Paul has a case to be made here. Now, he said some crazy stuff since he got in front of a camera and behind a microphone. This just isn't one of them. And look, I've heard it all. I've seen the comparison of stats and the talk of him playing with Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen, where he ranks at his position versus where Dwayne Wade ranks at his, as if any of that means anything. The conversation just goes in a million directions with there are comparisons that are both wildly subjective and or outright nonsensical. I mean, it sounds good. It sounds like you're saying something, but you're really in the context of who's the better player. If Paul Pierce is the 10th best small forward and Dwayne Wade is the second or third best shooting guard, first of all of that completely subjective. And two, so what? I mean, it sounds like you're saying something, but you're not saying anything. It doesn't mean anything as far as who was the better player, unless we're going to count up all of the top small forwards and shooting guards, and then we have to get into, well, there's guys that played both and the role on their respective team and the value of that position. I mean, there are so many variables that aren't taken into account when you start making comparisons like that. And look, I've heard the same cases being made when it comes to the MVP race between James Harden and Giannis Antetokounmpo. That if you put Giannis on the Rockets and you put James on the Bucks would still win 60-some games and the Rockets wouldn't win nearly as many. It's just, look, what's the point? Their teams have been specifically built for their respective strengths and weaknesses. The fact that one might be able to fit on both doesn't really prove anything. This is what that troubles me, is that, and I guess I understand it, but it just seems like there's more and more of, we're just going to rely on numbers and statistics. And even people that I know that are going to games and watching games, when it comes down to making decisions or comparisons or any of that, they fall back on the numbers. And look, I understand making a cogent argument for or against a player is hard if you just talk about their respective games based on how they actually play and what they do and when. It doesn't seem like, okay, how do I compare these? As opposed to, well, here's a line of statistics and here's another line of statistics and let me compare those. And these numbers are bigger than these numbers. Therefore, I can reach a conclusion. Yeah, you can reach a finite conclusion. Doesn't make it right. Doesn't make it accurate. It's certainly easier to make a finite and provable argument with numbers. But lose me on this idea that you're really proving a point, because you're not. Judging players by numbers is not like judging the crop returns for a farmer or the number of cars that a salesman sells or houses by a realtor. And I could even argue in those occupations, the circumstances warrant consideration for context. A realtor in the San Francisco market and what they're doing versus what a realtor in Charlottesville, Virginia, it's going to be slightly different. But at least in those fields, there aren't quite as many variables to consider. And I'm not saying ignore the numbers when it comes to players, when it comes to the NBA or basketball. I'm not. I weigh them, I look at them, but look at them through the context of how effective a player is doing what he's asked to do by his particular team. Don't make them the whole story. Don't give them the weight of this proves this. It doesn't. They can inform, but they don't prove. They don't. Honestly, they never have. All right. In our next podcast, Ryan Hollins will join me and we will discuss the bombshell of Magic Johnson stepping down as the Lakers president. Where does Jeannie Buss and the franchise go from here? We'll discuss that all in the very next podcast. In the meantime, as always, thanks for listening.